I'm Kayte Lewis from Voice Lawyers, and this is Voice in the Crowd, the podcast for people, not lawyers. It's about demystifying the law, speaking in plain English, and sharing practical insights into how the legal system really works in everyday life. Each episode draws on real stories and experiences, the good, the bad, and the confusing. If you feel overwhelmed or confused by the law, or you're just interested in our stories, this podcast is for you. Voice in the Crowd, where the law meets real people. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Matt Valentine, an investigator for Destiny Rescue. Destiny Rescue is an organisation that we support at Voice Lawyers and the work that they do. But before we begin, I need to give you a trigger warning, because today, in this episode of Voice in the Crowd, the content that we're going to be covering contains confronting material. We'll be discussing sexual exploitation, human trafficking, child trafficking, along with other deep and sensitive and disturbing topics. They're not easy conversations, but they're needed to be had and they're necessary. So if this content may be triggering for you, we encourage you to pause, step away, or listen when you feel ready, and to prioritize your own well-being above all else. For those who stay, we ask that you listen with care, with awareness, and with respect for the gravity of what is being shared. This is Voice in the Crowd, and these are the stories that cannot be ignored. So welcome, Matt, and thank you for your time today. I know that you're overseas, so this is one of our first online podcasts where we're practicing with our international guests. It's an honour to have you with us. Now, for those of you watching, Matt is the Global Counter-OSEC Director at Destiny Rescue and the co-founder of Scientia Program. So before we get any further into it, Matt, what is the Global Counter-OSEC Director and the Scientia Program?
Cool. Thanks. And thanks for inviting me. And it was an absolute pleasure to meet you in person finally, just a couple of months ago. So yeah, thanks very much. So Global Counter-OSEC Director is a very long title, but it's basically I lead the Destiny Rescue project in countering the online sexual exploitation of children. We'll touch on that in a second, I guess, but there's a very wide title for, I guess, explaining or outlining the sexual abuse of children facilitated online. The Scientia Program is a collaborative multi-sector network in Thailand that comprises of multiple NGOs, private sector organizations, and more importantly, law enforcement. And we collaborate together to enhance our capabilities. We empower each other, and then we go and actually look at doing the work together for a very short learning loop. And so it's a unique network within Thailand, something that's been tried a number of different times by a lot of different NGOs and other agencies. But we've managed to have that stick over the last 3 to 4 years. And the Scientia Program is simply a collaborative network to counter the online exploitation of children.
Okay. And your background is in law enforcement. You were a detective for 15 years in the New Zealand police force. That's correct, isn't it? So
that's right.
After that, you moved to Southeast Asia, where you started to work did you work directly with Destiny Rescue at that time?
No, I didn't. I worked for a different NGO. Funny, because I left the New Zealand police on leave without pay, meaning to say leave being the ultimate word. I was supposed to go back. And 1 year led to 2 years, led to 3 years to finally me resigning. And I guess the reason why was that I was exposed to the nature and the magnitude of the problem here in Southeast Asia. And I just couldn't turn away. And so it was a bit of a soft entry into the NGO space because like I said, I was intending to go back to the New Zealand police. I thought it was the best job in the world. And I thought I lived in the best place in the world. But once you've been exposed to innocent children who are very vulnerable, who are being harmed, it's really difficult to walk away. So it's been 5 years now since I've been in the NGO space, and with Destiny Rescue for 4 of those. So absolutely loved it.
So, and about Destiny Rescue, I mean, for people that have followed Voice Lawyers and our journey over the last few years, we've been supporting Destiny Rescue, but there's probably a whole bunch of people that don't know what Destiny Rescue is. And Destiny Rescue is a global Christian non-government organisation. So it's an NGO that rescues children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And it's present in how many countries?
Yeah, I think there's a number of non-disclosed countries that we're exploring opportunities. So I'm not sure what the formal number is, but it's more than 8 around the world of project countries. And what we do is that we look at the nature and the magnitude of crimes against children, and particularly human trafficking, and look at how it's manifesting within that particular country. And we wrap a project around, the largest areas where children are being harmed. So in Thailand, there's a couple of different projects. One focuses particularly on the physical exploitation of children within bars and brothels and commercial environments. In Nepal, for example, there's a number of vulnerable, both adults and children, being trafficked across the border to India, and it goes on and on. So we're in between 8 and 10 different countries looking to rescue children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking.
And so how big is the problem? How big is it? It seems that you're in eight countries.
Yeah.
And from Australia it feels a little bit like this is something that happens there overseas, but how big is it, and how often is this happening?
Yeah.
A big, very broad question. Sorry about that.
It is a very broad question, and I'm reluctant to spit stats at you because we're really at a disadvantage in this particular crime type because we struggle to articulate the fact that there's a face behind every story, and we can tell you that. But we see them on the ground. We see the faces of children, and we don't broadcast those faces. Of course, we protect children. We have a trauma-informed care approach to our media, and we're really at a disadvantage to a lot of other agencies that might support other things like climate change or animal welfare, for example, who can really graphically illustrate the harm. And so we're at a disadvantage. So I don't really like the stats around it, but I'll throw one at you, and that is in Thailand, 9%. So almost 10. So 9% of all children in Thailand is a victim of online sexual exploitation. So you walk past 10 children, one of them will be a victim of online sexual exploitation.
God. Okay, that's really huge.
Mm-hmm.
And is this something that, I mean, you work particularly with the OSEC, which is the online component of the sexual exploitation. Is this something that has grown in recent years?
Yeah, it has, and it's grown for a number of different reasons, and it's almost a perfect storm, I suppose, of circumstances. The obvious being the capability of the internet that's really reached, obviously globally, but even right in the provincial areas of Thailand, the Philippines, and their internet capacity is growing a lot faster than ours has in the Western world. Meaning to say they've gone from 3G to 5G, for example, where 5G absolutely capable of streaming video content, 3G struggling to do that. And so when you have a very short lifespan of internet capability, or the speed of internet capability, the education within the communities is not quite at the same level. So that's one. Obviously, COVID-19 that domiciled a lot of people. They couldn't leave. And unfortunately, my experience of people who harm children or pedophiles, they can't stop, and they look for a plan B. And so traveling sex offenders, for example, that would normally come to Thailand to offend against children, were looking for alternatives during that period, and that really spiked the demand. Some of it is actually the end result of some really, really good initiatives. Australia, for example, and other countries have blocked the travel of convicted sex offenders, which is a great thing. But again, it's domiciled people and it's forced people to go through to a plan B. And so there's been a number of different factors. You add in the socio-economic disadvantage between countries like Thailand or the Philippines being a third world country, Thailand being a developing country, and the ease that people in those countries can connect to people in Australia or New Zealand, and the economic disadvantage is quite extreme. Many to say $50 for me in Australia means the world to them, and that leverage, I suppose, is another really big factor of why OSEC has grown. Unfortunately, there were some of those things where you might have seen OSEC as being a replacement for physical crimes against children, but unfortunately the stats have stayed there for the last 4 or 5 years, and we've only really seen it grow. The other issue is actually understanding the nature and the volume of the problem. OSEC is a clandestine crime, meaning to say it's behind closed doors, so you can't see it happening. So you can potentially walk down the street of Pattaya, Phuket, maybe in Cambodia, in the riverside area, and actually look into bars and brothels and actually get a gauge of the age of children who are being sold, which is sad enough. However, with OSEC, because it happens behind closed doors, it happens often through deception and other causations that children can't point to very naturally. And so we have a very low detection rate of online crimes against children because it's hidden, and also because children don't understand, as silly as it sounds, that they are victims of certain crimes because of the deception and manipulation behind it.
Right. So the deception and the manipulation that is roping children into these crimes. I mean, how old are these children that you're referring to that Destiny Rescue is trying to remove from this situation?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And before anyone really asks about the volume of the issue, I tend to like to actually give you a profile of what one child looks like before I start saying there's 1 in every 10, Thai children, because that's very important, because it's not just the volume, is actually the impact on that particular child. So the average age of children harmed online sexually, so victims of OSEC, is just 12 years old. The average span or the abuse cycle is a lot longer because of those detection issues that I was talking about before, and the fact that children often cannot reach out for help, or very sadly, half of children who do reach out are not believed on the first occasion. Interpol gives a category around the seriousness of the sexual abuse on a child, which I obviously won't go into, but there is more category 1, which is the most serious types of crimes against children in the OSEC space. So if I compact all that, I'll tell you that they're younger, they're abused for longer, and they're abused more seriously online than they are in physical and commercial environments. So the average age of is 12, but also for longer and unfortunately in a more harmful way.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, look, it's a pretty hard one, especially as a parent, to think about that. Because it's hard to not think about your own children when you're looking at this. But so the online sexual exploitation of children has increased since COVID, and since the capabilities of the internet have increased. Does that mean that the physical, has it moved away from being, the exploitation that you would see perhaps walking down the street in some of these countries, or has it, or do we now have just more exploitation?
Yeah, unfortunately, we have more exploitation. Like I mentioned before, I would have liked to have seen a decrease in physical sexual abuse against children, but we've seen that come back in alarming numbers since the restrictions on COVID-19 have moved away. And so, unfortunately, we've got 2 major issues that are harming children rather than one taking over predominantly. Although, in saying that, most crime types have a natural evolution. And if I give you an example of stealing money, so theft, 50 years ago, you'd have a lot of bank robberies and violent crime to steal money. People have evolved away from that because they've seen that as high risk. You get caught more, and you only get one or two opportunities probably before you do get caught and go to jail. So they've moved through to deception and fraud-based crimes, and there's still theft and there's still people losing money, but that evolution of theft and the way people steal money has changed. And unfortunately, the exploitation of children is similar, where it hasn't necessarily moved away from the physical elements of crimes against children, but there has been an evolution massively to the online space.
Okay, and in that online space, if you know what you're saying is that those children that are being abused are younger, and
Yes.
it's more hidden for longer, and so that's causing obviously a lot more damage to those children.
Right.
So, you know, who are the customers for this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of OSEC, I suppose. Like I mentioned before, I guess when you say the sexual abuse of children, that's a very wide space, and so is OSEC. And so you have different variants of crimes that can be committed against children online, right from, I guess, things that impact Australian kids, like the sextortion of children, where they form a relationship with a person online, and that manipulation works through a cycle where a child's video image can be used against them for extortion. So whether that's more videos or images that are more severe, or it could be monetary gain. And so that's one side of it. Then we have things like the sharing and distribution of child exploitation material for demand. And so that might be where a particular person joins an online group or community, and they exchange the sexual abuse images of children, right up to the most serious. Well, when I say the most serious, probably the most serious crime that I've seen committed against a child in my entire career, and that's the live streaming sexual abuse of children. And we've seen a massive spike in that, particularly in both the Philippines and Thailand. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of Australians implicated in that particular crime type. So when you ask who the customer is, obviously the customer are pedophiles, but what we're seeing is a very, very large world come very, very tight within the internet. And we've seen people connect from Australia right to the Philippines within seconds and sometimes minutes to facilitate the sexual abuse of children.
So this is where, I mean, obviously the internet's worldwide, and Australia is obviously implicated in that as being Australian. I hate the word, like, buyers of this content, but it's not just Australia, is it? It's just what are the other? Where else is this going to?
Before I jump off Australia, I'd say Australia, by proportionately, and actually just by straight statistics, is one of the highest consumers of child exploitation material globally. And whether that's because I work mainly in the Philippines and in Thailand, and so people tend to offend in their geographic areas that they holiday in or they've seen in the past. And so whether Australians and New Zealanders are more prolific in Thailand and the Philippines because it's closer to our part of the world and it's something familiar to us, I'm not sure. But so Australians, New Zealanders, the Netherlands is also a very, very high-ranking country. And we tend to get smoke signals. And so what happens is that when we facilitate the arrest of a particular offender, we look at their financial records. And often that's one of the best clues of actually detecting who is sending and receiving money, which is an element of human trafficking. And I can't say that I've not seen a Western country represented in some of these. So generally Western men, so people that look like me, unfortunately, just normal looking Western men are by proportion, the largest offenders, particularly in that live streaming space.
And so I know you don't want to talk about statistics, but I'm pretty
Yep.
sure you've got the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
What are the statistics in relation to Australia and the online streaming of sexual abuse of children?
Yeah, so I'll give the stats because they're great stats, actually, and so they're not mine. So there's a really, really good organisation called Project Light Shine, and Dr. Michael Salter, who's a very well-known academic in Australia, they actually looked at a prevalence study and asked a couple of questions. Number one, and of course, when you're asking pedophiles or people, adult males, to talk about this issue, you're going to have a restriction in information. But regardless, 1% of Australians admitted to downloading child sexual exploitation material, yet 9% of Australians admitted to offending against children sexually. So 9% of children offenders, or Australian males, admitted to offending against children.
I mean, that just makes you feel quite sick, really, to think about that. Now, last year, you were featured on a 7 News special spotlight program, which aired in September of 2025, and that was a special that involved an international group facilitating child rescues from across various countries, wasn't it? And of children that were being subjected to this sort of abuse, and then their images being sold. From that, a number of arrests were made, weren't they? But there was a whole lot of more information that was provided to the Australian AFP about Australian men that were indulging themselves in this type of online sexual abuse. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was one of the toughest cases that I've worked on, probably, in, like I said, in my entire career, both from a impact point of view, but also actually the investigative, I guess, tenacity around it that the team put into that case was exceptional.
How long did it take?
So it took about 2 years to identify one little girl. So we became aware of a person who was offering the online exploitation of children, more so actually through still videos and images. And so when I say still, not live, so pre-recorded. And that referral was given to me, and I engaged with that particular suspect at the request of the police. And very early in the communication, the particular perpetrator started showing me the photos and videos of one girl. There was multiple children within the content that she was sharing with me, but there was one girl that kept on popping up. And just through the analysis of those videos, I could tell that it was likely that the offender and victim, or that child, were connected. So
to hone in that, you said it was she.
Yes.
So we've spoken a lot about men, but you've now mentioned, so this was a woman that was engaging with you to.
So if I jump to the end, there was actually, unfortunately, the mother of the 6-year-old girl that I'm about to talk about was arrested, and she, being politically correct, she was a LGBTQ male female, and so she presented as a female but was actually a male, and it was her that was, I guess, initiating. She was the salesperson, I suppose, and the mother, unfortunately, was the contact abuser. So we had her videos and images, and we actually noticed that she was photographed outside one particular green gate, which could have been anywhere in the Philippines, and we wrapped our investigation around that green gate. And I won't go into the depths of the story, but we used, I guess, a combination of pretty good technology and a little bit of tenacity, and actually found out where that green gate was in a city of like 10 million people in the Philippines. in Manila.
Stay.
And so we actually organised, together with the police who led, the arrest part of the operation, organised the arrest of that perpetrator. We support the police doing digital forensics, and that's the electronic investigation, I suppose, of devices found. With that particular suspect or offender, we ran the digital forensics and actually noted that there were 400 Australians, so 400 Australians connected to her purchasing the live streaming sexual abuse of one 6-year-old girl in the Philippines. One of those people was the person shown in the 7 Spotlight documentary. I personally saw his messaging to the suspect, and obviously I won't repeat it, but it was absolutely horrific. And I guess that's the person that 7 Spotlight picked up on and followed him through his journey of prosecution, etc. So don't really want to highlight one particular person, but for those that have seen, for those that have seen the documentary, he is a regular looking person. Like I said,
and a grandfather
from Taree, I believe, in New South Wales, so a small town. And he was, like I said, facilitating the sexual abuse of a 6-year-old in the slums of Manila, Philippines. So that just shows, I guess, everything we've spoken about for the last 20 minutes of how small the world is now digitally, but also how normal people are, or they look, who can be harming children.
Yeah, let's clarify that, how normal they look, in that that people aren't necessarily walking around with a big, black trench coat and with a sign. We don't actually know. So if you're looking at the amount of people there with, what did you say, 9% of Australian men have admitted to that's incredible.
Yeah, that's a massive number, isn't it? It's ironically, it reflects the amount of children that are harmed in Thailand. I mentioned 9% of Thai children, so not saying all Australians offend against Thai children, but it seems to be a very, very common statistic that close to 1 out of every 10 people within the community is either harming or has been harmed, unfortunately.
And so just to hone in on the crime that it is in Australia. So as you know, 1 of 400 was able to be prosecuted in relation to this one little girl. Obviously, if we were to amplify that out and to think about that is just mind-boggling when you look at the amount of children that are being exploited. And if there's 400 Australians involved with the exploitation of one child, and we're only able to prosecute one, how difficult is it to get a prosecution?
Yeah, and in the defence of the AFP, they were given a bit of a hard time in the documentary, not through my doing, because it actually hurt my feelings being former police, but there was actually, that was highlighted, and I understand that the AFP have actually done a lot of work around that one particular investigation, but it highlights how behind our legislation is, and the ability to work on a very dynamic crime type. Like I said, instantly somebody can connect to the Philippines. And I've interviewed multiple people who have been responsible on the consumer side, so on the Western side of the live streaming sexual abuse. And they literally go into forums or on Facebook looking for people who might have, a mother who might have unvetted access to a child or who might be vulnerable, and literally go through and just repeat introductions to try and get somebody to engage with them so they can actually manipulate them or force them into harming their children. So it's a very, very easy crime to commit. And my point is a very, very difficult crime to investigate, because a lot of our legislation is still very, it's around borders, AFP, for them to get information from Facebook in America, for example, it's not paper-based, but it might as well be. It's very, very slow. There's something called an AMLAT, so multilateral assistance treaty, which is like executing a search warrant offshore, that police in Australia, for example, let's say they want information from Canada, they have to go through this massive process that the Thai police tell me takes around 3 to 4 months to actually get a physical search warrant done on their behalf in another country. So our legislation is massively behind, I guess, how dynamic the scope is. So,
and just that, I mean, I looked at that case when it was happening, and I think he was charged with misuse of a carriage service. It wasn't actually as such a sexual offence that he was ultimately charged with. And, misuse of a carriage service is something that sort of kind of pales into insignificance in the light of what actually was occurring. But for the sake of our laws, that was what we had, or not we, but, obviously what the Australian law had to be able to convict him on. But it's different if he's found to have gone physically to the country and perpetrated that sort of crime, isn't it?
That's right. But unfortunately, if you look at the crime type, you've actually only got one crime, and you've got, I guess, the sender and the receiver of the same crime type, of the human trafficking, without making the sexual abuse of children sound robotic, but really it is a supply and demand type crime with the sexual abuse of one child. Now, in the Philippines, the mother and also the trafficker was sentenced to 28 years in jail. Now, this is the person involved in exactly the same crime type. So if you look at the elements of human trafficking, for the purpose of exploitation, moves any person for benefit. So she did that on her side. And on the Australian side, for the purpose of exploitation, moved an image for benefit, their own sexual benefit. So equally responsible for, the more serious crime of human trafficking. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of precedents in Australia for that. And I think what we need to do is understand the elements of human trafficking and how they look, and actually apply the law a little bit better within Australia.
I guess we need some sort of law reform. Now he didn't go to jail, did he?
No, he didn't. No, home detention. And so, again, I don't want to get into sanctioning, because I've spent my whole career complaining about judges and people that sanction. However, to me, that's nonsensical to send the perpetrator back to their crime scene. So he facilitated the abuse of that child within his home. So they sent him back to the exact place that he committed these particular crimes. Probably worse, where they mandated him to stay there for 3 months. To say he couldn't leave this crime scene, so probably forced further online. There might have been restrictions around using the internet, but how porous is the internet and how easy is it to connect there? So yeah, it's inadequate sanctioning. And unfortunately, as the person who looked the six-year-old girl in the eyes, and it's really hard to fathom the disruption to that particular child's life compared to the sanction of the person who facilitated it.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that obviously has to have a huge impact on you. It seems inconceivable to me as a parent, as I'm sure many people listening to this will feel the same way. I mean, how could you traffic your own child? And I was looking at some of the material that Destiny Rescue had put out the other week. Obviously, we're avid followers of Destiny Rescue, but and it was saying that you will often know who is trafficking you. I think it pointed to a teacher, an uncle, a friend, various people that are known to the child, and even now to adults, which is another area I want to touch on in a minute about these scamming centres.
Yes.
But like as a mother, I mean, you've referred to that. I mean, what is driving these people to do this? It's just hard to get your head around.
Absolutely is, and to reinforce that point more, a study in the Philippines showed that 70% of people who live stream the sexual abuse of children on that side of the crime equation are within the family group of that particular child. So you might have an auntie or a close neighbour, and to be honest, it probably is one of the most beautiful things about community living, particularly in the Philippines, where homes are porous. You know, a mother might work and a child will go to the neighbours, and it was community living. However, when that's turned into a negative angle, it's unvetted access to children within smaller communities. And I can't answer your question around why. I have asked a lot. Self-justification, I'll be honest, the things that people have said to me or perpetrators have said to me is that I'm touching my own child and nobody else is touching my particular child. And so they've actually tried to mitigate that for themselves. But having watched children go through their rehabilitation journeys, that is actually the more harmful point to them, is that the person who should be loving them and taking care of them is the person hurting them. And the other thing is that it's justified through deception. And so it's absolutely heartbreaking to see in the child where they're groomed. And grooming has quite a wide meaning, but grooming in this context means is that it's normalized, right? So you've got a 6-year-old little girl and she has positivity wrapped around her online exploitation. So she just had her 6th birthday. We could have this cake, or we could have this type of party because you helped mummy online. We can afford to buy this week because you helped mummy online. And so you have a child who's manipulated into being proud. And I have to say manipulated because they're not proud of what's occurred. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to actually see them almost be informed for the first time that they're victims of sexual violence. And it might sound silly to you and I, but when you are manipulated by the person that you love and trust into feeling that it's normal, or the things that are occurring are normal, and reinforce positivity, it's really, really difficult to see. And so it's soft crime. And when I say soft crime, it's through manipulation. And so parents potentially justify it to themselves that they're not physically harming to their child to the point of anguish or pain and those sorts of things. Now, what they're doing is causing anguish and pain mentally, and the trauma that stems from that is absolutely massive. But there's a little bit of self-justification there. So I can't really answer your question, because I think 99 out of 100 parents, even if they're living in the depth of poverty, would never touch their children. There is 1%, and it's always when you've got a lot of people in a particular country like the Philippines or Thailand, 1% is actually a large number. And so, it's a difficult question to answer. But as a parent, I find it very, very hard and difficult to see myself.
Yeah.
And so I'd certainly echo that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, going from there, I mean, I mentioned it before that there's the manipulation that goes along with this, that there's another area that Destiny Rescue is working in. And it may not be, I don't know whether that's exactly your area, Matt, but certainly these scamming centres, which is where some of the older, not quite so young children and maybe young adults are finding themselves. And I certainly know I've read a number of stories about this, and this is directly affecting us in Australia because they're calling us. But particularly, I think Myanmar is one of the main places. Perhaps you can fill us in on that, of the manipulation and the human trafficking that's happening in relation to these scamming centres.
Yeah, so right across the border. So as a lot of people know, Thailand's right in the Golden Triangle. So Myanmar is a border country. The border is very porous, meaning to say people can go over there, I won't say with ease, but it's not that difficult. So people in that particular crime type, and I'll use the word deceived again, are deceived into applying for a job firstly, promised really good wages and salary and benefits. Things up front look very, very legitimate. So the websites that are built or the Facebook profiles that are advertising these jobs look like legitimate recruitment agencies. But long story short, they're recruited and asked to come to Bangkok, for example, Bangkok, Thailand, and then they'll be told their place of work has changed. So then the last minute shift in their employment conditions. It's still a good job. Stay with us. Your salary is going to be great. And then they're driven north towards the border in Myanmar and are taken across the border, and they're trafficked into scamming compounds. Now, when people hear that story, they might, and a little bit like how we were talking about children, how could a child accept that, or how could they be so silly to actually think that that's normal? Well, these people are very, very good at deception. And I mentioned before how the evolution of crime is actually moving towards deception, and they're absolute professionals at deceiving. And when you're a little bit desperate, so maybe we've just come out of COVID-19, for example, people have lost their jobs, they're looking for a good job, they apply, they're hopeful, and they're offered a position that they could only dream of, told to go to Bangkok, so they've already invested their time into going, hey, look, there's a little bit of a shift in your working conditions. They're going to accept that. They're not going to want to accept that things are starting to unravel for them. And so the deception is layered by so many different contexts. So they actually take their passports. So there's withholding documents. There's debt bondage. So they'll be charged a recruitment fee, meaning to say when they get into the scamming center, they'll actually never pay off. They're actually not getting paid at all. So they actually get given a salary. So let's say they might get $100 a week or whatever, but that is actually taken off their recruitment fee. That's compounding in interest. So they're actually losing money rather than making it. And so all these little legitimate things. So on the front end, when somebody joins or applies for a job, they've signed a contract. And even after the first week, they might have got salary, a little bit of salary. So they actually feel like things are legitimate. And so this is what I mean about actually multiple layers of deception, because it's not until you get right into, the scamming center where you start to realize this is actually not right. I'm in a different country, no passport, no money, no salary, and I can't leave. I don't know where to go if I escape. I'm an illegal immigrant in this country because I don't know how I got there. I just got taken over the border, and now all of a sudden I'm in Myanmar. So they're contained by circumstance.
I mean, I was looking at a story around this the other day. I don't even know how I came across it, but it was someone who was wanting to be like an actor, and they'd been an influencer.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling, were they from Japan? I think they're from one of the other Asian countries, and so they'd gone there to accept a role. They'd got flown into Thailand, and it was going to be their dream role. Get there, they were drugged, taken across the border into Myanmar, and before long, then they ended up in one of these centres, and it's often people that are quite good at English because they want them to be on the phones running these international scams, and that this person actually ended up getting up, because I think he had a girlfriend who caused quite a lot of ruckus on social media, and so they were actually, it was the Thai government that went and got them back. I mean, I've only got the vague outline of the details, but it's like this is crazy that these are people that are being taken advantage of, and like it feels a little bit a bit scary because, as you said, the deception is so real.
Yeah, they're not silly people, and we could equally say when we're talking about the sextortion of Australian children, our children are not silly. People are very, very good at manipulation now, and so even the scammers, so the victims, so the people who are calling the Australians, it's not just, hey, give me some money. It's actually the multiple layers of deception through that. They might actually ring from a registered Microsoft number or something like that to make things look absolutely legit. And they profile their potential victims on age or demographics and target certain people. So there's a lot more thought put into it. And so I think we need to probably get away from victim blaming to a certain extent with a lot of our crime types, because the deception of these offenders is so good.
All right. So I guess that brings us back to, I know we've been doing fundraisers for Destiny Rescue now for, I think, 5 or 6 years, might be longer. I'm not sure. Some time. I should know that number. And some of the feedback that we get when we go up there is like, oh, why would you support that? Human trafficking and child sex abuse. Like, why would you choose that as a charity that you want to? Because it makes people feel quite uncomfortable. And I'm saying that from my point of view of going out saying, hey, we need your support. This is what's going on. I think it's changing, over the years that we've been doing, and I feel like people are a little bit more open to the conversation of what's going on, but they're still no less shocked when they hear, as am I, even when I hear you speak, Matt, about the depths and the level that it's going to, it's quite difficult to listen to. But why should we in Australia care about this? Why don't we just go, look, this is happening in Asia, this is happening in India, this is happening in other countries. This is not us.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, because if I get invited somewhere for dinner and people ask what I do, it automatically is a conversation killer.
Stop
Yes, I'd rather be an athlete, or play rugby or whatever, and a little bit magician maybe. But unfortunately, we're really lucky that we also get to look in areas that are very difficult and do something about it. And so, why should Australians care? I think a lot of different reasons. Number one is because we're not, I guess, handing out aid to another country. And I've mentioned Thailand and the Philippines a lot, we're not handing out aid to Thailand and the Philippines because our people are complicit in the abuse of children in these countries. And so it's not aid. It should be absolutely mandated that Australians actually ease some of the burden, I suppose, on the harm against children in these particular countries. The other thing is that Australia is not immune, and our children are not immune to online harm. We have a massive, or when I say we, here's a New Zealander saying we as an Australian, but
we'll forgive you. It's okay.
we have a massive issue with online harms of a sexual nature against our children through things like you said of sextortion. Now, these crimes evolved within Southeast Asia from those early signs as well. I'm not saying that Australia will get to the point of massive amounts of live streaming sexual abuse, but our children are being harmed, and so it's touching home. And so we have compassion fatigue. You just need to get on social media and you'll look at something. People have an attention span of 3 seconds, and they might see the war, Gaza, you might see Ukraine, you might see a harmed animal, and then you might see Destiny Rescue pop up. So I absolutely get it. It's difficult. People are compassion fatigue, but we struggle to really, like I said, draw attention because it's an uncomfortable topic, like you mentioned, but also be brave enough to point it back home and say, hey, look, our people are actually harming children in other parts of the world, and we need to step up because. But also, I
just want to clarify there on the sextortion, just in case people don't understand what that is. That's where our young people are being manipulated online to give photographs of themselves in perhaps compromising positions, isn't it, to someone else, and they think they're giving it to somebody that they've met that's of a similar age, and then it turns out that fairly quickly that they're not, and then those people then threaten to send it to their friends or distribute it to their parents or their school, and there's actually been a number of suicides of Australian teenagers in relation to this. So absolutely. I mean that is happening. The other, in terms of online, and I work a lot in the domestic violence space in Sydney. And I have seen cases where parents are desperate to try and assist their children because they're clearly addicted and they can't get these devices off them. That have resulted in AVOs, and actually when they have got the devices off them, these kids who are like 13, 14 actually are being extorted or are being groomed to be met up with in local parks.
Yeah.
And so it is happening here. So I don't know, is it too much of a jump to think that these 400, yeah, I mean, obviously it's more than 400 people, but out of these 400 people that had looked at that little girl, that some of them are turning their attention to the kids next door and to the kids in Australia.
Yep. And I don't want to be an alarmist, but 50%, so half of people who admit to consuming, so downloading child sexual exploitation material, are contact offenders. So it's natural to say, just through those statistics, there you have 200 out of the 400. And to be honest, I'll probably tell you that 50% of the other half that aren't are probably liars. And so it's easy to say that, okay, they're just downloading it, and we have these terms that soften the crime. We have kiddie porn and other things, he's just downloading silly stuff as child sexual exploitation material, and it's a prerequisite crime to the contact abuse of children. And I'll touch on your point before as well around self-harm and our children being harmed online. Children who are victims of any type of violence online, so sexual violence, so right from grooming right through to live streaming, are 600% more likely, so 6 times more likely to harm themselves. So it's an absolute ticking time bomb. And children are not stupid, like I mentioned before. These are not strangers that pop up on their social media or their DMs in a trench coat. These are charming people with backfilled profiles that look legitimate, that have targeted your child because they understand their vulnerabilities, and often they profile the victim. So they'll look at a person who, or a young child who doesn't have many likes on their photograph. So maybe they've uploaded just recently a picture of themselves. Proportionately, maybe they've only got 10 people who have engaged with that and actually liked it. Now, they would know that person probably struggles a little bit with their self-confidence. So what does that child want to hear? They want to hear that they're beautiful. And so you've got somebody who owns a charming profile, who connects with a vulnerable child who's, like I said, in a space of just looking for positive reassurance, call them beautiful for the first time, and they literally, it's hook, line, and sinker. And like I said, our kids are not stupid. What we need to do, and I need to speak to myself here as well as a dad of a 12-year-old, we need to keep a safe place for our children to come and talk to us about these particular issues. Because if my child shared an image online, of course I'd be upset, no doubt. But you need to create a safe space that a child can actually approach you, because getting into the sextortion that you were talking about, early intervention is absolute key before they keep going through that cycle of manipulation, because it doesn't just happen once, it happens over multiple cycles of getting an image from your particular child, wrapping some extortion around it to get a more serious image, and then it builds and builds and builds. So early intervention is absolutely crucial. So, a little bit of parenting advice, if I can give it, is to actually keep an honest connection with your child. Because they need a safe place to go to. And I'll go right back to one of the stats that I said before around OSEC victims, is that half of them are not believed on the first occasion. So if your child does talk to you about it, know that half of parents will say, "You're being stupid. I told you not to send that online," and victim blamed. And now that's being harsh on parents, but we really need to actually just listen to our children if they have got the bravery to approach us.
Yeah. Look, it's it is a whole new area that we're looking at. And look, I don't want to go down the route of talking about, the under 16 laws and social media and all of that. But I just do want to make one comment about that, is that, given the stuff that I've seen, given that we're quite involved with help with supporting Destiny Rescue and, the education that's provided. And to see parents when they were jumping online going, "Oh, how can I help my child get around this?" And I was just like going, "Oh God," because they're so upset that they've been cut off and they can't talk to their friends. I'm like, it's a minefield, and I'm not sure that all parents quite see the extent of what is happening. I mean, obviously you see it. I see a little bit because of the work that I do. I get some insights into it that perhaps other people don't have. But yeah, it's really quite scary.
It's scary, yeah. And you really got to find that fine line, don't you, between being a tech denier, but also embracing technology and actually teaching our children how to use it safely, because I'm not sure either approach is correct, because, I mentioned my son, most people in his class have a device and they communicate through that device, and his football team, his soccer team, they talk on WhatsApp about when their practices. And if he doesn't get online, or somebody doesn't get on his behalf, he can't attend a basic thing that a child should do. And so, we've got so much of our life that's been poured into online. I don't think we can be deniers. We need to accept that social media and the online space is a part of our child's life. But also on the other end, there's some massive guardrails that we can provide our kids to keep them safe.
Yeah. So, wow. And obviously that's a big education piece. And I don't think we're going to achieve that one today. Maybe that's another episode. But what I do want to talk about before we wrap it up is the work of Destiny Rescue. I know it all feels quite dark and gloomy, but I know that one of the great things about Destiny Rescue is it's not just about identifying this, but it's also about rescuing, as it says, and actually taking these kids out of this and then giving them options on the other end. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the reasons that I moved across to the NGO space, and particularly Destiny Rescue, from the police, was the subtle shift. And it might not sound like it's too much, but actually moving from holding offenders to account to putting the child right at the center of what we do. And so by keeping the child at the center of what we do means we have a trauma-informed model all the way through our participation in both investigations and restoration. And that moves, I guess, the space between holding people to account for a negative point of view, and to heal a child, they might need justice. So they might need a particular offender held to account, but their welfare is Destiny Rescue's primary focus, and we don't just let go at the arrest or the prosecution. And so I've seen just massive successes in a lot of the children. Like I said, I've been around about 4 or 5 years now with Destiny Rescue. So I've seen actually the journey of a lot of kids who I rescued in the early parts of my Destiny Rescue time go through and achieve some amazing things, whether they're very young, so, the 6 or 7-year-old that I was talking about before, to actually getting a really great education, having stability in their life, having basically all the pillars that you need to actually succeed as a child, or other children that we've managed to remove from harm who might have been 15 or 16, so slightly older, who've actually been put through vocational training to give them career opportunities so that they actually make a career out of legitimate, fulfilling work, and that's removed all of the risk factors for them. And so what I've loved about my time at Destiny Rescue is actually watching the journey of the children that we rescue, because it means a lot to me. Whereas, like I said, with policing, lock up the offender, prosecute, go back to the start of another investigation. So actually, I love the space in Destiny Rescue that the child is at the heart and the center of what we do. And so lots of amazing success stories and beautiful little faces that I've seen almost grow up in front of my eyes.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that on the website, or if people were to follow Destiny Rescue's social media, because we'll put all of those links in if people want to do those, if they want to follow those. And also if you want to support Destiny Rescue, of course, every person that is affected is a person. Every person that's rescued, it's a chance to bring change, and they're followed through. And I guess that's the point we're trying to make. It's not just a case of we got them out and then they're going back. That they're getting healthcare, they're getting education, they're getting the chance to break that cycle that's put them in that circumstance in the first place, which sometimes is poverty, I guess.
And I can tell you, like you mentioning sort of you giving and people giving generously, even smaller amounts make a massive difference. So I removed a child from harm in the Philippines, and as I'm going through this particular investigation, I noticed that she was so attached to this one teddy bear. She had it on every time that that I engaged with her online. When she was removed from harm and rescued, it happened quite abruptly. She got taken from that very harmful environment without her teddy bear. Now, I knew about this teddy bear because I followed it through this investigation. I found out where that teddy bear was sold and went in and bought her an exact replica of the teddy bear. Now, that cost me $20. It was $20 Australian to go and buy that. That changed the whole trauma profile of that particular child for having something that she kept as I guess, a very normal and comforting thing for her to go through to one of the most difficult times in her life. And so little things can make a massive difference. Yeah. So people have, as we know, have different resources in their life. Some have financial resources, others have time, others have different things. And financially, if that is your resource, even small amounts can just make a massive difference to what we do on our side of the world.
So we'll put a whole bunch of links for anybody that wants to know more about Destiny Rescue to follow them. If you want to support Destiny Rescue, please do so. And of course, if you follow Voice Lawyers social media, you will definitely be hearing more about Destiny Rescue in the, every year because we do something. But look, thank you, Matt, for your time today and for sharing that. I know you're a very hard man to get hold of because who knows where in the world you are. Yeah. But I look forward to seeing you again when you're in Australia next. And please, thank you for doing what you do.
Well, I'll finish by shouting out to you. So I love my time when I walked into the Voice Lawyer office in my one visit to Sydney last year. I could just feel, I guess, the meaningfulness of what you do. So whether it's in the domestic violence space that you're working in, but you can just feel the heart, and just want to say thank you for what you do to look into a very, very dark area and actually shine a little bit of brightness. So whether it's through, fundraising events, whether it's through highlighting the issue, that's a very difficult issue to touch on. So I just want to, turn the spotlight back on you and just say thank you for highlighting this.
You're welcome. We do what we can. Okay. Well, thanks, Matt. Till next time.
Cool. Thank you.
Just before you leave, I have a quick but important note. What we've discussed in this podcast is general information only. It's not legal advice, and it's not a substitute for getting advice tailored to your specific situation. The law, and family law and employment law particularly, are highly fact-specific. Small details can make a big difference. So if something we talked about resonates with you, we encourage you to get proper advice before taking any action. Nothing in this podcast creates a lawyer-client relationship, but we're always happy to point you in the right direction. If there is something you'd like us to discuss, please reach out and let us know, and I hope you tune in next time.